No other composer had a comparable musical breadth as Igor Stravinsky. He surprised in his late years with the composition of serial music, enchanted with the composition of his middle neoclassical phase, and became a revolutionary in his early years with his famous ballet. His Sacré de Printemps changed music forever, and Arthur Honegger rightly compared the effect of this work to that of the atomic bomb. Who was Igor Stravinsky, and what places and people shaped his life? A biographical approach to the century artist from Russia. Stravinsky was born 1882 in Oranienbaum, about 30 kilometers from St. Petersburg, into a well-situated family. His family came from the bourgeoisie, and Igor grew up in the pre-revolutionary St. Petersburg of Tsar Nicholas. His father was a gifted musician and sung as a bass in a musical theater. Stravinsky was a talented pianist and mastered Mendelssohn's piano concerto by the age of 50. His father wished that he would study law, which he did in St. Petersburg. There he met the son of Rimsky-Korsakov, who arranged for him to meet his father. The latter recognized Stravinsky's talent and advised him against attending the conservatory. Instead, at the age of 23, Stravinsky became a student of this Russian master, whom Stravinsky considered his second father, since his biological father had already died in 1902. Stravinsky were granted 3 years with Rimsky-Korsakov until his death in 1908. Early on, the young Russian started a family. At the age of 23, he married Ekaterina Nosenko, his first cousin. The two could build a house on Ekaterina's father's estate in Ustyluk, present-day Ukraine, where they spent the warmer season for several years. There, their first child was born in 1906, and Stravinsky began to compose his first masterpieces. At a concert in St. Petersburg, the theater entrepreneur Sergei Diaghilev heard Stravinsky's scherzo and Feu d'artifice, and requested that the young composer should create a new work for his Paris season of Ballet Russe. Thus, Stravinsky came to Paris for the first time in 1910. His first ballet work for Diaghilev's company, Des Ballets Russes, was The Firebird. Paris became the main focus of his artistic activity over the next years, and Stravinsky returned repeatedly for follow-up projects for Diaghilev's ballet company, which achieved world fame with the help of Stravinsky's music. The performance of Sacré de PrintempsTheatrical became a theater-century scandal and made the 31-year-old a celebrity in one fell swoop. But what exactly happened during those years? In 1909, musical history occurred at the Théâtre du Châtelet. Modern ballet was born. There, the Russian impresario Diaghilev presented his Ballet Russe, the Russian ballet, for the first time in Paris. Vaslav Nijinsky and Anna Pavlova were the stars of the Russian Mariinsky Theater. They danced to the choreography of the gifted choreographer Michel Fokine. The ballet seemed dead at the time, frozen in its characters. Fokine freed it from its empty periods. Diaghilev united it into a total work of art of dance, music, and stage design, and Nijinsky became the god of dance. For the 1913 season, Diaghilev moved to the newly built Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. The piece that was presented was Stravinsky's Sacré du Printemps. Already the theme of the ballet, a ritual murder of a young woman, cast its shadow. Fokin's choreography, Nijinsky's shocking dance, the costumes, and, above all, the never-before-heard sound of Stravinsky's music catapulted art into the modern age. The frenzy of the audience was gigantic. Opponents and supporters jeered, whistled, and got into each other's hair during the performance, which turned into the biggest theatre scandal in history. Only the conductor kept cold blood and finished conducting the work. The evening was later nicknamed Sacré de PrintempsTheatrical. In memory of the famous ballet russe, the city of Paris had a Stravinsky fountain erected at the Centre Pompidou, which became a conspicuous and popular photo subject in the Igor Stravinsky Square. It was designed by Chantin and Nikita Saint-Phal and was installed there in 1983. It consists of more than a dozen figures animated by water, all of which have a reference to Stravinsky and his work, such as a firebird. The World War ended the phase of Parisian ballet, and the Stravinsky family spent their war years in Switzerland with their 4 children. With the first work commissioned for Paris, The Firebird, Stravinsky had already moved his winter residence to Lake Geneva. On the one hand, because his wife appreciated this mild place due to health problems, and on the other hand, because the impresario of the ballet russe, Diaghilev, had temporarily set up camp in Lausanne. Stravinsky worked on many important works during his time, such as Sacré de PrintempsTheatrical, Les Noces, or L'Histoire du Soldat. He became friends with the conductor Ernest Ansermet, who became an important promoter of his works and premiered 7 of his works by 1930. He also found a cordial relationship with the writer Ramu, who wrote the text for L'Histoire du Soldat, based on a Russian tale. Most of the houses or hotels where the Stravinskys lived no longer stand, but the beautiful Villa Rajivu can still be seen in its full splendor in a park. Here Stravinsky lived with his family from 1915 until 1917. Currently it houses a beautiful restaurant and inn and is called La Maison d'Igor. Stravinsky loved the arts and always sought collaboration with representatives of other artistic genres. His friendships with Jean Cocteau and Pablo Picasso became famous, and they also spent time together privately when they explored Rome and Naples together. Cocteau wrote the libretto to Oedipus Rex, and with Picasso he realized, among other things, a Pulcinella production in Paris, where the latter was responsible for costumes and stage design. In 1992, Stravinsky, who was in money trouble, moved to Grange near Paris at the invitation of Coco Chanel to her Villa Bel Respiro. Coco Chanel had sat in the auditorium at the premiere of Sacré de PrintempsTheatrical and met the composer. Chanel and Stravinsky probably had an affair during his stay in Grange. In 1921, Stravinsky moved with his family to Biarritz, with the financial support of his patrons. Stravinsky's financial dependence was due to the Russian Revolution, due to which it was no longer possible for Stravinsky to access the royalties of his ballet in Russia. The choice of residence was made because of the mild climate, the healthy air and its positive influence on his wife's health, and last but not least, because there was already a large colony of Russians in this fashionable place. Stravinsky had entered in a contract with the Pleyel piano manufacturing company in Paris during this time. They had provided him with an office there, and Paris became his second home, where he cultivated his relationship with the mistress Vera de Beausset, who, with his wife's knowledge, also accompanied him on his travels. The Stravinsky family lived in this Biarritz villa at number 9 Rue de la Frégate, and the Russian composed important works here. In the second half of the 19th century, a Russian colony had begun to form in Biarritz. Rich aristocrats had built villas and spent there mainly the Russian season between September and November. In 1892, the magnificent Orthodox Church was opened. When the revolution broke out in 1917, many Russians found themselves in Biarritz, known as White Russians. Villa Belza became the social center. The name of the villa came from Basque Belza, meaning black. It was the second name of the wife of the builder. Stravinsky's brother-in-law, Grigory Belyankin, had converted the villa into a Russian restaurant in 1923 and set up a cabaret where the Russians could have a good time with Cossack choirs and theme nights, just like at home. Eventually, the Stravinskys left Biarritz in 1924, tired of the winter storms, for Nice and then Paris. After years in French provinces, the Stravinskys made their home in Paris, on Rue Faubourg Honoré, from 1936 until the outbreak of World War II. He later described these years as the saddest of his life. The family fell victim to tuberculosis. While Stravinsky had to be hospitalized for 5 months, his wife Ekaterina and his daughter Ludmilla died of this disease. In 1939, Stravinsky decided to emigrate to the United States, together with Vera de Bossi. He had already been able to make contacts in the 3 visits to America since the 20s. But the first thing Igor and Vera did was get married in New York. The two moved first to Beverly Hills, then to Hollywood, where they lived until the end of the 60s. Walt Disney was eager to collaborate with Stravinsky to use the music of Sacré de PrintempsTheatrical for his animated film Fantasia, and together they realized this project. This led to Stravinsky reworking some of his works to secure royalties, as Russian exploitation rights were not accepted in the US. From the 40s, Stravinsky began to conduct and travel more. With the works for the concert hall, for example the Symphony in C, the Symphony in 3 movements, and the Concerto in D, he had composed an appropriate repertoire in the 40s. With these works and his opera The Rijksprogress, he ended his neoclassical phase, which was replaced by the serial late phase. He conducted the premiere of The Rijksprogress in 1951 at the Teatro alla Fenice in Venice. It is a strange opera, with the recitatives accompanied by the harpsichord, strangely composed tonally in this atonal period and at times reminiscent of Mozart, Handel and Donizetti, a throwback to times gone by. In the 1950s, he met the conductor Robert Kraft, who became his artistic right-hand man until Stravinsky's death. In 1962, on the occasion of his 80th birthday, Stravinsky was honored by John and Jackie Kennedy at the White House with a medal and dinner. He spent his last 2 years in New York. He eventually died there in his Fifth Avenue apartment of heart failure caused by pulmonary edema. At his own request, he was led to rest in 1971 next to his wife in his final resting place in Venice. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, a few meters from Stravinsky's grave stands that of Sergei Diaghilev, the famous impresario of the Ballet Russe and artistic companion, who died in Venetian exile in 1929. Since then, music lovers from all over the world visit Stravinsky's grave and honor this great of music who influenced the music of the 20th century like no other.